welcome to the Human Frequency on American Freedom Radio. We are broadcasting live from the wintry hills of Southern California. Well, it's almost winter. It can't come too soon for us, but it was already starting to get a little cold where we were just this past week.
We just got back from Big Bear, California, where I did a public talk, and we had a chance to do some really beautiful energy healing on the land there with the help of our friend Gina Weiss, who brought us up there to do the talk, and she was actually a guest on our show last week, so you could check the archives and listen to her talking about the work that was done in Big Bear by Rainbow Thunderheart, also known as Blue Thunder, otherwise known as Bovido, a man with many names.
Otherwise known as Blue Thunder.
Or Benny LeBeau. He went up to Big Bear back in 2004 and came back many times since then to do his medicine wheel ceremonies to heal the land, bring back precipitation and snow, and help with the lake levels, which had been getting very low. Those lake levels are low once again, and Benny LeBeau, Blue Thunder, passed away this June. So now we need to take up the work that he started and continue it. So we went up to Big Bear and we did an orgonite gifting of the lake. We tossed orgonite into the lake. We neutralized every cell tower we saw, and there were a surprisingly large amount.
Mm-hmm. Each time a new one came up, didn't expect that, but that's what happens. You see them and you get them, and then that's it. You don't have to worry about them anymore.
Well, you have an uncanny ability to see them.
Well, they're not exactly very well disguised.
Well, I could feel
they try
them.
their best, and if that's their best, then that's really good news ultimately.
It is, and actually, our host Gina was driving us around and saying we need to hit the ley lines, and she had these ley line maps, and the ley line maps are very helpful. And we were gifting a particular tower, and she said, "But we need to get the ley line intersection," and I said, "I think we just did." Because
it's right where the tower is.
Exactly. They put the towers on the ley lines. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like they're marking exactly where we need to gift. It's kind of funny that way. So they put a deadly energy source where there's a high amount of life energy. And then we go and put the orgonite there and neutralize the deadly energy and restore the life energy that was already there.
Thanks for the help, losers.
Yeah, Big Bear is great because Big Bear already has a very high orgone. If you go to my blog, thekembo.tumblr.com, you could see the glorious skies that were over Big Bear while we were there, tossing orgonite into the bushes, into the lake, at the cell towers. And we went up to a beautiful place called the Eye of God, which is a quartz outcropping in the mountain. It's a big piece of white quartz, and apparently it was blasted with dynamite a long time ago by people looking for gold, people in disharmony. Anybody who would blast such a beautiful piece of quartz obviously doesn't understand the beauty of it and the energy of it. But what is so beautiful is being able to take the pieces of that destruction and build medicine wheels out of it to restore the balance and create something beautiful out of the destruction. So we built a medicine wheel and a phi wheel and did a little ceremony with just a couple of people, Gina and another friend, and it was a really wonderful experience.
And to do it as the storm was coming in was really nice. A couple people reported rain after the fact, and we had a nice talk to several people in Big Bear the day before about the topic of orgone energy and the damaging effects of EMF and what people can do, solutions that they can utilize to neutralize them.
The people at Big Bear are particularly concerned with chemtrails and drought, and they know the connection, and Blue Thunder, Rainbow Thunderheart, had helped them to clean up all that deadly energy and all that geoengineering and restore rainfall, and in fact brought massive snowstorms through his ceremonies. But maintenance is needed. You can't just leave it, and the people of Big Bear just needed a little extra push and another energy tool. So the orgone energy is going to help that area tremendously, and a very receptive, beautiful community up there that's ready to take the torch, and there are many people up there doing the work already. We met a couple with a chembuster in their yard that they had built, and they said after they built it, they got 2 days of rain. So we know this stuff works. We just got to keep on going. And we drove back down into the Antelope Valley, and it was raining on us. It was beautiful. And over the Antelope Valley, again, you could see the pictures on thekembo.tumblr.com. What a scarred landscape. It was like the surface of the moon or Mars, but the clouds, wow, you couldn't believe the skies over this land. That land is being restored. maybe one day we'll see green grass growing there again. So it's quite a beautiful experience.
It certainly was. And if you're interested in checking out the episode that we did with Gina Weiss, you can go back into the archives, which are available on AmericanFreedomRadio.com. If you go to the Human Frequency page, you will find those archives. You can also find them on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/thehumanfrequency.
Well, today we have a special guest with us, Ann Maurer. And Ann Maurer is a California-born author and artist who holds a Bachelor of Science degree in landscape architecture. Her art shows how much she likes trees and greenery. She is open to the energetic wonders of nature and sees drought destruction as reversible, like us. Her business, EnviroTechnical Imaging, has been around for 25 years, helping builders, residents, and public agencies visualize solutions to negotiate land development and land preservation agreements. She's attuned to how projects are designed, how plans get influenced, how properties get restored, and builders receive approvals. In 2003, she began studying the documents of a deceased energy inventor. He was the first American to register patents in every country in 1916. Working with mentors in her spare time, she began to learn modern global energy history. Now she merges her variety of understandings to assist people who want to heal our world and build future habitats. I'd like to welcome you, Ann. Thank you so much for being with us today on the Human Frequency.
Thank you for having me.
It's really a pleasure to speak with you. And you first got in touch with us over Orgone Energy, and you had purchased some orgonite, and you sent a very nice email, and then we corresponded a little, and every message you sent was so packed with information. And you told us about your business, which is in creating images of land so that people can understand what it's going to look like when they do a project.
That's the easiest way for people to visualize extremely complicated blueprints, and now there's the overlay in California of extremely complicated environmental impact reports and environmental law. So if we're ever going to move toward orgonite and healing and incorporating that kind of technology into the land, we need to understand how these documents, these plans, and even the laws work and get really comfortable with it. That's what I help people do.
Well, it's a great thing you do, because the land planning in Southern California is abysmal and really needs help. I grew up here in Los Angeles. Actually, all of us are from the LA area, which I find very interesting and rare. And you're currently living in Yorba Linda.
Yes.
I don't know much about Yorba Linda because it's behind the orange curtain, you see.
Yes.
I know nothing about Yorba Linda.
Can you tell us a little bit about where you live?
And is it related to Loma Linda in any way?
No, it's not related to Loma Linda. It's its own community. It's a very beautiful place. It's kind of one of these hidden secrets. It's rated as one of the top 10 communities in all of California to live in. So we have people from all over who have come there to retire and resettled from different parts of the world. One of the big things is that there's a lot of trees there. They actually allow them to grow most of the time if they're not a public safety hazard. These trees are allowed to be very mature, and on my walks, I've been finding trees that are full-blown heritage, complete canopies, and you just feel the energy from these beautiful trees that people actually take pride in Yorba Linda, that the city doesn't make, whack them down to nothing,
right,
and cut them to twigs.
Right, that's a huge problem in Los Angeles, where we're from. I was devastated.
And all over the place,
all over
not
the
just
world.
Los Angeles, and
Yes.
not just exclusive to cities either.
No, actually, even here, where we have, here we live in the mountains, and our community apparently has rules protecting the trees. Even with those rules, trees get destroyed. I saw a beautiful mature tree that was older than the house that it was supposedly damaging, much older than that house, get cut down, and it was devastating to me. And I believe that tree was speaking to me for days, because I heard this kind of screaming in my ear for days after that tree was taken down.
They do scream, and I will tell you about an event that you know about that
Yeah.
we'll discuss, indeed.
I'd like you to tell us about it. I mean, I'd like to know about Yorba Linda as well.
Well, definitely the number one tourist attraction in Yorba Linda is the Richard M. Nixon Library. It just recently went through a $15 million overhaul and had its grand reopening, and attracted people from all over. and it's a highly energized place. I don't think anybody's who's been through the front doors or the galleries would disagree that what's represented there in the galleries is extremely powerful, whether you lived through the Nixon presidency or not. The museum is set up to transport you through war, prisoners of war, a lot of weaponry, a lot of civil rights discord. There's a lot more energy put into representing the struggle and the blood than there is really toward the end of it. It's like people have to find their own healing inside the galleries. And it's just an amazing, energetic experience if you've never been there.
It sounds like it's showing a lot of negative imagery.
It is. It is. I would say definitely, I could say 80% or more. I know that in the archives and in the library part of it in the basement are protected many documents. The docents try to help tell the story to all the visitors. But in terms of the power of negativity of that time, if a child went in there and knew nothing, they might be a little bit scared.
It sounds scary.
It is scary. It's perfect for Halloween.
Right. In fact, we should have had you on for our Halloween spookathon, which never actually happened.
Oh.
Like I said last week, we just ended up watching The Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, and putting it all behind us because I'm not really into scary stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't want to dwell on fear. But it does sound like there's quite a bit of fear imagery, and the whole Nixon era it has so much fear to it.
It has left a strong, strong imprint that many people from all over are still working through. And if you go to that place with these artifacts and these new exhibits, interactive exhibits, you'll pick it up. Undeniably, you'll pick it up.
Well, I wanted to ask you, since you did bring it up, you had an event happen in Corona, California. That's in Riverside County. And it was pretty devastating to the people of Corona. And it really hit home for me being from Los Angeles and seeing so much destruction of nature. Los Angeles is a city that just does not revere nature at all. I believe Los Angeles
That's the understatement of the century.
It's a satanic city. Angeles is all screwed up in the head.
By the way, Corona is a little bit southeast of the main part of Los Angeles, just again for people who are not familiar with the city.
Yeah, we are Southern California people, and we've traveled all these places, and we've gifted Organite in Corona, but just along the freeways. We haven't gone in depth, but we will. We went into Redlands this last time we were there, so we were hitting everywhere. But Corona is a community that really needs trees. It's a real desert kind of environment, and you shared with me a devastating destruction of the urban forest. So can you tell us, what is an urban forest?
An urban forest is actually a designated area, and there are many tree agencies, supposed tree protection agencies, who have mapped very carefully what areas constitute an urban forest with enough shade and enough tree canopy to attract birds, and that humans can thrive under that tree canopy, enjoy the shade, recreate under that canopy. And so, do you want me to go ahead and describe exactly what happened?
I do. I know what happened, but I think this is something that needs to be told. This is a very important story, and it went completely against these so-called regulations, which again confirms my knowledge that these regulations don't really exist.
Well, what happens is the public agencies, of which there are many in the state of California, are not exactly on the same page, and I'm going to choose my words carefully here. They're not exactly on the same page in terms of how the priorities come down the pike and get implemented. So obviously there was a lot of infrastructure repair and retrofitting that needed to be done in an area that is the highest density of human population in that city. So there's a lot of multifamily attached units. And this linear corridor, which was like a linear park, a designated urban forest, had 20 trees in it that, without any notification to the thousands of residents that live around it, one morning at 6:30 in the morning, out of nowhere, the saws come. And if you want to know how it feels comparable to that film, There Are No Forests. The sound of these saws, not just cutting little bitty branches, but these were 40-year-plus old Italian stone pines of immense canopy, immense shade density in a very hot concrete part of the city that thousands of people used as a linear park to walk and exercise, including myself. And so when these tree cutters came, the tree cutters were told to keep their heads to the ground, to not interact with any residents. There was one city representative there. After a couple of hours of hearing nonstop cutting, I got up from my desk and I said, this is awfully weird. And I come out to my street to see them destroying these 20 beautiful, perfectly healthy Italian stone pines. The story just cascades and gets worse from there, as far as me trying to contact city officials, contact the governor's office, contact the Arbor Society and every type of agency there is. I formerly worked for a state senator, so I'm not shy about trying to find out what the genesis of some type of program is. And to find out that there is absolutely, short of me calling the sheriff and stopping this entire operation, which was a massive operation, short of doing that, it proceeded for the next several days, and they ground those tree stumps into the ground, took away every last branch and shred, kind of like the Grinch taking the last crumb from under the Christmas tree or in front of the fireplace. And children were screaming. People tried to call the city and protest. I, of course, called the local newspaper, the Press Enterprise. Their reporter who covers the Inland Empire and Corona specifically. I talked to him. I talked to a lot of people, and absolutely no news of this got out. There were a couple of posts on the Facebook communications page for the city about the children and how upset they were. No chance to grieve, no chance to say goodbye to these trees. And that was the travesty of how it was handled. And so in the end, it happened. They erased all the entries off of the Facebook page, and it's history that will never be told.
This to me is further evidence that government is ultimately the problem.
It is the problem. We were talking about the field next to our house, the empty lot, which was a beautiful ecosystem that had all these sagebrush plants and quail living in them and rabbits. And because the property owner received a citation from Kern County, from the fire department, the citation was pretty much to mow the lawn, and that's it. He got scared, and while we were out of town, he leveled the entire lot. We weren't even here to defend ourselves and make sure that our sagebrushes on our property weren't destroyed.
They were.
And they were destroyed. We came home, and this entire ecosystem was leveled because of a government decree that this is a fire hazard. Now, I know for a fact those sagebrush plants were not a fire hazard because they were green and thriving. Maybe the dry grass needed to be mowed. But people are way too scared of government and way too easy to cave into it. And here we have a government body going against their own regulations and cutting down an urban forest in Corona. And what I want to ask you, Anne, how can they do this when at the same time they're trying to implement Agenda 21 and say everybody should be walking and biking? We know full well they're trying to implement Agenda 21 full blown in the Inland Empire in San Bernardino and Riverside counties. How can they cut down trees on a walkway and then say we encourage you to walk?
Because they're parasitically infected. Oh, wait, you asked Anne.
No, and
having an identity crisis.
And that's perfectly okay. The parasite that caused people to destroy so much nature needlessly, way in excess of meeting their needs, even fur trappers and people hunting buffalo, where it became sport. Killing became sport. This type of parasite that is so the opposite from living with noble conscience is very easy to transfer now in today's government environment, where we have so many bodies of government, we have so many agencies. We're well over 400 in California at this point. It took me the better part of a day to even find out which agencies to call, and I'm calling clients and people in the know who understand our state government, and they're saying, well, you call over here, call over there. And ultimately, it's not even the regulations working against each other. Things like this happen, then cover-ups happen, and then, just trying to silence the citizenry so that they don't bring forward intelligent criticism. Now, I'm sure they didn't plan on someone who's an urban planner living in that neighborhood.
Right.
Okay, so this was not good. The story changed every time I talked to that city representative. The story changed from the first excuse that he gave me for these trees being destroyed. Oh, there were unpaid ADA fines. ADA is the American with Disabilities Act. And complete conflict of interest to have the Department of Water and Power handling ADA. I mean, these people from the city assured me that there was no law being broken, that their attorneys were all over it and this and that. But the fact is, they know how hard it is to challenge when a law like that is broken. It would cost you, the citizen, so much of your time and energy and expertise.
Well, we're not citizens, because citizen actually means employee.
Yeah, we learned that from Jordan Maxwell.
Yes, it does. I know that. And I definitely appreciate what I'm learning from both of you about that.
Well, yeah, we don't consider ourselves to be citizens. We are living men and women, all of us. But we are residents, and we do have a say in the land that we live on. And there's no way the people of Corona didn't want those trees. So those trees were taken out for a reason, and that reason was not in the interest of the people living there.
No. Parasitic actions are ostensibly never in the best interest of the people.
It's insane. I still can't wrap my head around it. It doesn't make any sense.
And when we had this thing happen, not just with our sagebrush plants, but with this gigantic... This tree must have been at least a century old, if not 2 centuries old.
Can I tell you about this tree? This tree was living there for at least 100 years. Then in the 80s, somebody built a little house and thought it'd be really, really cool to build the deck around the tree. Now, apparently, today in 2016, the owner of the property thinks that the tree is damaging the foundation. Why did they build the house around the tree?
Well, it's what I was saying was that it puts in perspective when 20 trees meet that fate versus... I'm not saying it's any better or worse necessarily, but it's just it's an epic travesty when that happens. But in this situation, there is a happy ending in that when they had trimmed the branches, and as they were making their way down the trunk with each segment, one of those segments tumbled down and smashed right through the deck, breaking a big, nice hole in it.
I was so happy.
That was
awesome.
That warmed the cockles of my heart.
At least the tree got its revenge. Well, I'm kind of going out of order in what I wanted to talk about today, but this is fine because, Anne, you have such a wide variety of fields of knowledge and expertise. And
the human frequency is unscripted.
Right. So I have all kinds of questions for you. I'm going to start out by asking you about your work with EnviroTechnical Imaging. This is a really new field. I think you invented this field. This is new. Where you create an image of the land the way it will be after a project. So instead of someone guessing and saying, well, I think this will happen, you create an image of what it will look like. So I wanted to ask you, how does your work help with land usage planning and in protecting the natural beauty of the environment?
The answer is that it's still unfolding now. There are a lot of computer programs that people can buy, some of them very inexpensive, that can help you start doing this type of work. It's called visualization. I think the legal term for it is photo simulation. Part of the California Environmental Quality Act from the 1960s specified that if there were going to be visual impacts of a project that was going to be built, and there might be some problems with the amount of visual impact from that project, that a visual analysis study needed to be done. And so in that a niche where I was working at a civil engineering firm, a very large civil engineering firm, I became one of the artists and just ran with it as far as doing this kind of work by hand. and taking engineering drawings, for instance, of a bridge and showing what the bridge would look like built, which meant I had to learn how to read and interpret artistically all different kinds of plans, bridges, street widenings, architecture, landscape architecture, signage, design signs, everything that was going to go into that picture. And I just kept running with it more and more, and then went into doing it digitally with digital photography. And that is where we really start to cross into people's emotional reaction to a project, which is an energy unto itself from the time you're planning that project all the way through to when you're building it. There is a momentum and an energy and almost an Akashic imprint going into what you as a group of people, and you may just as a neighbor to this project come by and say, what are you guys building there? What's it going to look like? And then you start to have opinions. Are you going to put some sagebrush in there? Yeah. So
I hope so.
Yeah.
Just don't remove it out of our yard first and then put it there.
Yeah.
Yes, and I do use sagebrush, one of my favorite plants.
It's so beautiful, and that it houses a lot of wildlife as well. So if you love birds and animals, that actually makes a difference what you plant.
Absolutely. And the higher the consciousness of everybody involved in that planning process, then we step beyond the legal requirement that you make this drawing or image so that you can get your project approved and hopefully not get sued as it's trying to get built. And so that's a whole environmental legal game. But I'm urging clients and participants to step further into the energetic side of it. In other words, young project managers that I work with go, well, maybe we'll try and get so-and-so to weigh in and get that group down there and Irvine to weigh in and this and that. And what happens is just magic as far as the city being very content with how the project is coming to their planners, and the neighbors having been able to weigh in on what's going to happen. And then, of course, all the designers can just, boom, go flying with their ideas, and you can way exceed anything that I can put together in an image.
Mm-hmm. It'd be nice to see some thoughtful and conscious land planning in Southern California, which is a wasteland of mini malls, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And I just wonder, and I wonder if you can answer this, why is Southern California so plagued with destruction of the landscape?
I don't know that I know all the answers. I know that there tends to be, and you posted that image that I gave you of the oil rigs,
yes,
in excess.
That really hit home for me.
Yeah, and I think
the analogy you made between the oil drilling and the EMF that we're now experiencing with the cell towers.
Cell towers going in, by the boatload everywhere. And that's what people tend to do. People tend to say, oh, good thing, it makes money. Let's all jump on board. Mm-hmm. So everybody wants a piece of that action. So now California has gone from more local planning to much more international planning. And that means international investment. And so this is what I think happened to our land between the 1980s and now. And of course, we have the hands of Agenda 21 in it,
of course,
telling us exactly what it's going to look like. And people are going, here's a good example. We talk about stack and pack buildings, multifamily attached, but the alternative to that is the village motor court.
I see. And tell me what that is.
Those are 1- and 2-story option. You can option the second story of your house or not. Maybe someone has bad knees or in your household, and so you just want a 1-story. So you can flip and choose these different floor plans and whether you want a second story or not. And instead of one driveway for every single unit, you have a shared driveway. Mm-hmm. 4 to 6 units share the driveway. That all of a sudden frees up land as you go through a housing tract, and you have the village motor court. And that's one thing I wish Grindal 61, who's protesting Agenda 21 so much, would kind of give us some imagery and ideas.
Yeah, and you can go on YouTube and look for that channel, Grindal 61.
I've learned a lot about Agenda 21 in the Inland Empire. He lives, I believe, in Rialto or Fontana, I think Fontana.
Yeah.
And, it's so wonderful.
Beautiful region
I know.
of Southern California.
It's a wasteland, but it's really nice that somebody in that area is so involved and so passionate. He deals with San Bernardino and Riverside counties, which so need this attention because apparently Agenda 21 is being implemented hardcore in those areas. And I don't even understand. How can Agenda 21 be implemented in these suburban
I
areas?
know. No one's going to go along with it.
They have to drive to downtown LA to get to work. Do they want to take a train or a bus? And I'm not talking trains. In the LA area, people are taking buses. The train system in LA is really not that big. It doesn't go that many places. Most commuters in Los Angeles on public transit are on the bus. Now, how are you going to get from San Bernardino County to LA County on a bus? How much of your life is supposed to be spent commuting? So he's saying, no, people here do not want to take their bikes to work. They do not want to take the bus to work. They can't even feasibly do that. So how are they going to implement
I'll just
Agenda 21?
bike in 105-degree weather underneath the hot sun for a couple hours. Do that for a few weeks and see how I feel.
I actually have lots of examples of where there's an optioning toggle that I think especially the millennials want. And they want to be able to choose, and if you're going through a bike phase in your life, they want plenty of bike paths to use. If they're going through a bus phase, they don't want to own a car at that particular time in their life. Maybe they want to do a lot of international travel or something. They want to be able to have a bus system that works for them. But when they want to get into a car and use a car, they want that freeway system to work and be managed digitally and flow and on-ramps and off-ramps and getting anything out of the way that's an obstruction. And this is all possible. So what I do is gather examples of places that are just stellar examples of these types of things working together. Mm-hmm. This is not rocket science. If you have one hand, however, telling you it's only going to be stack and pack.
Right.
Then you're going to bring resistance, you're going to bring just a real breakdown of people's spirit because you're not giving them what they want, and you're dangling the carrots of the financial incentives in front of city councils that are like, oh my God, I'm strapped for cash.
You have to have options. And what Grindal61 talks about on his YouTube channel is that all of these city councils, like Fontana, are just going along with the globalist agenda. And when questioned, they won't come forward and tell what's really going on. These are not decisions being made by these municipalities.
Right, these are unelected bodies. He uses that word again and again. This is something we should all be very aware of. Unelected bodies making land planning and city planning decisions for us. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there are many ways to get involved. I'm hoping there's going to be a lot more writers and artists that bring this to the forefront, because a lot of us have been through the colleges and have chosen other endeavors, but we can help guide the people that do. Like, hey, how do we make a change here, mm-hmm. rather than just accepting what's laid on us?
Yeah. So what's your vision for sustainable land usage in a way that doesn't take away human rights?
Oh, that's a really good question, Gabe.
Because that is the crux of it with Agenda 21. Is that
they claim it's sustainable, but but that's not what it's about.
Meanwhile, in reality, rights are being taken away at quite a feverish pace. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter what they say. Once you see through the BS, then you know what's actually going on. So is there a way to I even hate that. I even hate that word sustainable.
There is
because
no
they
definition.
They just co-opted it.
No, it's very. I mean, I went to the millennials debate at the Richard Nixon Library, where there were people in their late teens, early 20s, talking about the issues. Some of them were one supporter, and some of them were another supporter, but all the same. We, the elderly, were there to listen to the millennials in very vigorous tones tell us how they view the issues. And this is where I formulated in my mind, they want a toggle switch type of environment and political system so that their different phases of their life can be served well. And I would say rights for them and then their children once they have children, and their housing needs met. Each type of housing and land use that we can plan can serve the different options that they want. And these are not massively diverse options. I mean, we all need to get around, and our easements and right-of-ways for power, energy, and transportation are very much in place in Southern California and throughout California and many cities in the U.S. So it's a matter of just doing a much, much better and more detailed job of planning to preserve your rights for where you want to live and give you the toggle options to get in a little electric cart or your bike or your car.
Yeah. I can tell you that Gabe and I, living in Los Angeles, we liked that toggle switch because when we lived in LA, we did not drive much at all. We took bikes and public transportation most of the time. But if you have to go a long distance, let's say you have to go visit a friend in Orange County or in Long Beach or somewhere, and it's not accessible by rail, like Long Beach, you can get there on the Blue Line. But let's say you want to go to a part of Long Beach, it's not accessible by public transportation.
Yeah.
Torrance, there's an example of a place you really can't get a bus to Torrance. So
South Bay is difficult.
Yeah, you need options. So while I very much support public transportation and bicycling and did it myself and commuted by bike, of course we need the option to use a car.
We're also voluntarists, so forcing people into one choice is not the way to go. But
Right.
I'm very wary of any government ideas because they're all ultimately going to have the same parasitic intentions behind them. So
It's laziness. A lot of it is laziness. You've got a very secure position most of the time, and you have a very regimented way that you are evaluated and that you go up the ranks in pay scale and security toward your retirement in these bureaucratic systems. Whereas if you're a private entrepreneur like me, I am forced with every project and every set of people that I work with to be more innovative. And the older I get, the harder it gets, because I have to really pull from just, decades of experience. But yet I can see that I'm connecting with these younger project managers and these younger visionaries. And it's like, okay, I'm going to deliver these options and show you that we can very quickly put them on the map. So we're not just talking about one or two alternatives, but maybe we're talking about 6. And then we have to get the conversation going and the dialogue to get down to how we're going to finance it, build it, create the space for it. And that's the kind of detail we need to get really, really good at.
Well, do you think it's possible that all this Agenda 21, all these ideas will actually be implemented in Southern California? Or do you think that residents will just say no because it's not compatible with our lifestyle here?
because it's not sustainable.
Well, it's not sustainable, and that's the thing.
It's actually not, no.
We live in Southern California. It's a very big area. We need to travel. So I'm just wondering, will this stuff actually pan out?
It's already panning out. It's a document, and it's a document of ideas that was coined at a certain point in time. And even since that point in time, it's supposed to be dynamic and modernizing and this and that. But let me give you an example of the kinds of things for both Agenda 21 and American with Disabilities Act. We can now build sidewalks, and they have some in Santa Monica, that are kind of rubber-based, and as the tree roots rise up, they kind of go, in a manner that accommodates the tree root without having to blast the concrete and then plane down the root and go ahead and harm the tree a little bit, and then you've got a piece of concrete that's going to crack again. So some of these really old-fashioned city maintenance methods are being replaced by very cutting-edge ideas all over the world. And I cannot say with certainty even that any place is really saying, well, what would be the energetic scalar energy solution for this? I mean, to even get that conversation going is going to have to take courageous people that are going to face an entire city council or planning commission that says, what the heck are you talking about?
Well, I don't support going to any city council. I mean, we advocate
true.
moving out of the city, actually.
Yeah, that's what we've been
which
doing.
is one of the things where, we have led by example, I feel.
The thing is, so many people need to live in the city too. And while I was in the city, I felt that there was value to being in an urban environment. But we don't want that environment to be completely taken over by globalists who don't know anything about us. So when Anne was talking about how this mini mall reality that we live in Southern California is caused by people from other places that don't even know what it's like here. Likewise, the destruction of the field next door was done by someone who doesn't live here. So if you don't live somewhere, you're not going to be compassionate about the needs of the people there.
It's very deep to be able to work with planners in every capacity, whether they be civil engineers, architects, land planners, landscape architects, who have some kind of feel for at least that region where that planning is being done. The Agenda 21, I think, criticism that I have is not that the document doesn't have some good ideas, but it's that all those empty high-rises in Shanghai are being, built here. I mean, the same multinational firms are building them. We are being told that we are being convinced, propagandized that overpopulation is going to be what it is, and so you're going to need to live in 200 square feet, and
which is a lie that
Yeah.
Jim Mars
yeah,
has
do you believe it?
debunked
Yeah,
on our
yeah.
show.
Do you
Yeah.
believe it?
Jim Mars said that you could fit the entire world population in Oklahoma. And in his book Population Control, he talks about this, that all of these laws are going in, and this implementation of Agenda 21 is being done for a false reason,
Yes.
that we are overpopulated, and we are not. If you could fit the entire world's population in Oklahoma, we are not overpopulated. Not that you'd want to do that.
Yeah, even less reason for me to go to Oklahoma at that point. No
Well, we-
offense, anyone from Oklahoma.
We have so much land. I mean, we drove home from Big Bear through the Antelope Valley. There is so much land. We do not have a shortage of space for people, nor do we use so many resources. We were noting that the amount of food we eat and the amount of wood we burn for energy, it's just minuscule.
It's absolutely tiny.
We are just little tiny human beings on a very, very big world. And I don't think we're overpopulated.
No, definitely not.
Well, I think Jim Mars makes some very good points in that book, and I know that you're influenced by his work as well.
Yes, he was the first historian writer that helped me to identify what genre I had fallen into by researching the story of this inventor that no one had heard of, and for me to see his work. And he's been a professor and taught classes in Texas, but to see that someone had gone so far down into the history, not just of the Federal Reserve, but he started out looking into the John F. Kennedy assassination.
Yeah.
So this is what brought me to kind of a next level of knowing, hey, this is the genre you're in. And, this is why people are kind of turning away from what you say about this inventor every once in a while, is because they haven't heard of it anyplace else. You're the world authority on it. And who are you? And why has the rest of the world not talked about this inventor? So you're in Jim Mars territory.
Yeah. Well, we'll get more into this inventor in hour 2, but I wanted to just go over some real basics. Because we mentioned when we introduced you to the show that you are into this inventor that no one's ever heard of. Who is this?
Milon James Trumble. He lived between 1879 and 1931.
And
And
what did he invent?
And that's all.
No,
Chew on that for a while.
This is about what we were going to get into some hidden history, and this is about the hidden history of oil. So we're definitely going to go really in depth into Milon J. Trumble in hour 2. But if you can give us a brief introduction into who he was and what he invented and discovered.
the first inventor to register his patents in every country of the world in 1916 was Milon James Trumble. He is best known in a lot of scientific journals for inventing continuous oil refining. As I began to look at his history and read his patents and even his own handwritten notes, I began to see that it wasn't just petroleum that he was into. he was so excited, and his wife was taking notes one night in 1924, talking about the absolute abundance of every type of carbonaceous material there was, and that there was no need to just build an empire based on oil, but that you could use shale, lignite, which is brown coal. There were clean ways of working with coal. A lot of choices were made to use dirty energy, and I don't know whether that was deliberate or just was apparently more cost effective. But the amount of invention that he and his peer inventors did that was so far beyond what we ended up with as a planet and as a people is just shocking.
Wow.
I've been in shock for 14 years since learning of it.
So he invented cleaner ways of using these resources, which we're clearly not implementing. And that is what interests me, is this hidden history and what we're not being told. Because we're so dependent on oil. And we're so dependent on these really dirty methods of energy. And at the same time, this goes back to when we were talking about Agenda 21, they don't want us using them. So what it looks like is that we've been given an option only for dirty energy sources, and then we're being told we can't use them. So then what are we going to do?
Stop fearing all these laws. Stop fearing that we can't invent. When we invented things in the 19 teens, not just Trumble, but many, many inventors, we have to uncloak ourselves from this veil we're under of not being able to speak of these inventors and these patents and this technology. You and I have spoken, Sharon, about inventors such as Reich, and other ones I can mention are Royal Rife and Tesla. We all know Tesla.
Of course.
Well, now we've got a beautiful logo for Tesla. We have branded and made international the whole Tesla ideology with electricity and batteries. But are you still, from all of that commercialism, learning about scalar energy, really?
No,
From Tesla's...
they're not. And there's
No.
a Tesla
Yes.
car, which is an electric car, but we're not using Tesla's
No,
technology.
we're definitely not. And it's just more suppression. And I'm glad you mentioned Reich, because the suppression of Wilhelm Reich continues to the present day. Do you think there, or do you know of parallels or similarities within Trumble's lifetime?
Oh, gosh, yeah. Let's start
It's
with...
kind of an obvious
I
question.
know, I know,
Of course
I know.
there's going to be suppression going on. But in what way do you think, and to what degree?
Well, let me just paint a visual for you, and I'll be showing this in a slideshow at a public library presentation that we'll talk about. But the absolute visual that everybody can kind of get into their heart in an imprint were these photos sent to his widow after he had died in 1931. And these photos arrive in her mailbox in 1932. Every single fragment of everything had been smashed to smithereens in his experimental yard, which is in a specific location in Alhambra, California. And so not only was all of his anything, any setup, pipes, concrete, tanks, gauges, was just all lying on the ground. I have those pictures. There was one retort that was processing shale into whitewater gasoline and carbonized shale, again, in a continuous process that he had invented. That thing is kind of in place, and we know that that kind of disappeared over the horizon, perhaps with the rising sun or some country like that, because the Empire of Japan was petitioning for that technology in probate court. But I can tell you that the pictures of this inventor's workyard smashed, and then the picture sent to his widow, is very much heart-wrenching, like watching Reich having to burn his own books and papers in front of the federal agents.
It's terrible. And the suppression of these clean energies and free energies, it's apparent, and it's not, this is not conspiracy theory.
No.
It's obvious that there's a reason behind it. I want to know just a little bit about how you came upon MJ Trumble, because this is very unique that you even know about him. You cannot even Google him. I mean, you can, but there's just so little up there.
I know, and it's...
Even less than Reich.
Yeah.
Way less.
Yeah, I mean, you really have to know where to dig and where to look. And so basically, I'm the only author, I think, that's taken him on as far as trying to write about his life. However, there are plenty of documents from symposiums at which his work is discussed. And a lot of that goes in technology and works that are with the Royal Dutch Shell. I'm pretty sure that the Royal Dutch Shell has very healthy archives on this gentleman. But that's okay if they don't want to release him. I came into it because I knew one of his granddaughters for 22 years before she mentioned him to me. That's how closed the information was, even within their own family.
Wow. You're going to be doing a talk about him so people can learn more about MJ Trumble. Can you tell us a little bit about the talk? We're coming to the end of the first hour, so I want to make sure everyone knows where they can go hear you talk about him.
I'll be at the Yorba Linda Public Library on Thursday evening, November 10th. My slideshow starts at 10 o'clock. I'm sorry, it's November 10th and it starts at 7 p.m. Yorba Linda Public Library, Community Room. The address is 18181 Imperial Highway in Yorba Linda, 92886. And I will have a very extensive slideshow and a gallery of posters that I've been showing all over.
That's excellent. Well, I don't know if you could talk about it, but are you able to discuss everything you want to discuss at this event? Or is there stuff that you're going to have to save for our show?
Well, we can talk about that a little bit later. I mentioned censorship and suppression, and I know you had your own little battle with
Right.
that. But
Well, yeah, there's a lot to talk about, and the Yorba Linda Public Library is a government building, so I was just wondering if you would be able to come forward with everything you want to. I know we only have a couple minutes left in this hour, so anyway, we can start to talk about it, but
well, I think we should give people a little bit of heads up about our next event
that's
too,
true. That's
and
true.
where they can find our work.
Well, we're going to be up in Portland to do a talk, and that is on November 12th, and that's a Saturday afternoon. All the information is on my website, thekembo.com. I will be speaking, and so will Holly Cook, who has been a guest on our show and will be a guest again, and also Brad Olson. There's going to be a lot of interesting topics related to alien activity and UFOs and human ascension into higher levels of consciousness. And of course, I will be presenting on how we can use orgone energy in our lives to improve our own energy fields, clean our atmosphere, clean up our homes. So I'm excited to go to Portland, Oregon, where I lived for many years. And I have I want to say a love-hate relationship with Portland. I don't know, maybe it's more of a hate relationship, but I'm going to start to love Portland again because what I've realized is what I didn't like about Portland can all be healed through energy healing and orgone energy. So I had a lot of problems with that place. And Agenda 21 has got its grip on Portland, but I definitely believe that through gifting Orgonite up there and doing this talk, we'll be able to flip that energy.
Absolutely. And we don't have a venue yet, but stay tuned, and that will be decided on shortly.
Well, apparently the venue has changed. So there, you will see a venue on the website, but that has changed, and I will be updating that tomorrow. So don't worry, we are going up, and we will be speaking.
That's right. You have been listening to The Human Frequency on American Freedom Radio. Please join us in Hour 2. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Human Frequency on American Freedom Radio, streaming live at AmericanFreedomRadio.com. And just a reminder, American Freedom Radio is listener-supported, so please go to that website and click the donate button. Help keep these programs on the air. We are back in Hour 2 with our guest, Ann Maurer, talking about MJ Trumble and the history of oil. And you had a little battle yourself with censorship recently. Do you want to tell us about that? It seems to be a common theme here.
Yeah, and it could be getting more common, but it's how we handle it and not just shrink in complete paralyzed fear from it that's going to determine how we make our future what we want it to be, okay? And give ourselves the right options in energy, in cities, everything. So basically you have to know your venue, and that's what this lesson was for me, know thy venue. And I was told by the public library not to mention an author that spoke at the Richard M. Nixon Library. There are a lot of authors and speakers of every type that come there, and since it's close, I go there. And I had mentioned that I wanted to pull out at least a few parallels, draw a few parallels between the type of work that Andrew Scott Cooper, the author, has produced, a lifetime of work. I've been at what I've been doing for 14 years with MJ Trumble, but he's been at it much longer. He's a professor. He wrote the book The Oil Kings, and the latest book he wrote is about the Shah of Iran. And he is at the point of receiving death threats, and had a very, very good, his research is just awesome. It may not be agreed with by everyone, but every author who writes about an inventor or oil history or energy history, anything, might have a slightly different take. Sharon and I could write two different accounts of Reich. But that is what we need as far as open dialogues and conversations that I think everybody wants to have.
Of course, yes. And isn't the death threat like just the ultimate confirmation of doing the right thing?
That is, and it's like the parasite. You have really pissed off the parasites, but
good.
Basically, so I was told I could not, at the public library event, mention Andrew Scott Cooper, and it was put to me that while his work may be important, we do not want you to mention him. In other words, some patrons of the library, and this is how it was explained to me, would not favor this, and you came to the library and said you were going to talk about MJ Trumble, so why would you mention, somebody else? And in my presentations, I'm everywhere in terms of topics, because MJ Trumble used many forms of energy and built what he built all over the world, not just in California. So there is pretty much no topic that's regarding energy, water, machines, inventions that would benefit people in life that I wouldn't touch on. And especially personal to me is anybody that has spent years and years researching energy history, bringing it to people, even if you don't agree with how they write it, how they write that energy history. We should all have an open manner of saying, well, okay, I like this book better than that book, but it's okay for Sharon to write, it's okay for Gabe to write, it's okay for Anne to write or speak about an energy inventor.
Mm-hmm. It makes no sense to me that you would be censored at a public library, except that it is a government building. But this is an extremely important topic, and anything related to it should be discussed.
That's right. And rest assured, you will never be censored here on the Human
I know,
Frequency.
we talk about everything.
So that name one more time, please.
Andrew Scott Cooper. And you can look him up, listeners, if you want to see what he has written. I think you'll be able to see why certain people might not like what he talks about. But the same could be true to the work that I've done about MJ Trumble.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to roll into the future here and trying to write the history in ways that are relevant. And my audiences and readers come to me and tell me, this is what I'd like to learn more about. This is what I'd like to hear.
Well, let's get right into Milon J. Trumble. What did he invent regarding oil usage and extraction?
He wasn't on the extraction side. He was on the refining side.
Okay.
And this is probably why very few people would even know to look him up under that. But in the very early days of oil, there was this mad scramble for people to try and figure out how to refine oil and make it more useful for all kinds of products. And hopefully most people know that we use it for cosmetics. We use it for every type of lubricant you can think of. And
like Vaseline.
Yes.
And plastic bags.
And plastic bags.
And organite, by the way.
So really, I mean, the future is open as far as what we can choose to continue to use carbon energy as and not. And I don't like to use just the term petroleum, because the refining that Trumble did was also applied to asphalt. And so you want to hopefully open the doors a little bit to people's understanding that this particular inventor, his earliest patents in the early 1900s, had to do with asphalt, refining petroleum, and also natural gas, which is a very important topic today with methane levels being what they are. And he invented the Trumble gas trap, which is a device, a canister type looking thing, but he made very big ones. And he patented quite a few different models. They capture the methane coming up from the drilled hole in the ground that is also capturing oil, but the methane used to be just burned off in huge flares, and it is still done that way in a lot of countries, a lot of places, and that's contributing to the methane warming. But this guy, in as early as 1910, had invented a very effective gas trap. And if you think of these people struggling with the metal and the valves and things blowing up, I mean, it's a very dangerous, deadly thing to try to even be inventing something like that. But his were sold all over the world. There were other inventors who also invented gas traps. But we had, from pretty much 1910 on, these gas traps being installed in oil fields. And that was helping to reduce some of the crazy jet stream interruptions and weather cataclysms going on around the world, wherever there were these oil fields that were like wall-to-wall oil derricks, and methane burn. I know the light's coming off.
Well, yeah, the methane gas.
Ding,
ding,
I
ding,
mean,
ding, ding, ding.
So that is very interesting to me that this would affect weather.
That's my supposition. I presented that at the Petroleum History Institute this past July in Casper, Wyoming. And I just brought up the question, wouldn't the early oil drilling from the late 1800s that escalated at such immense levels in Russia, in Brea, California, in all these different places where oil was being discovered and wells were being put in right and left, and everybody was still not only just burning off the methane in at the top of your oil rig, they were burning entire fields, because these fields were, I mean, so there are postcards showing massive methane burn-offs. Well, guess what happened? The temperature spiked to 134 degrees in California. That is the icon that was built. The world's tallest thermometer commemorates the 134 degree temperature
Is
spike.
that in Barstow?
Yes, it is between.
Okay,
Yeah.
I've seen that thing.
Oh no, it's in Baker.
Oh,
I
Baker,
think.
right, Baker, on the way to Barstow.
Baker, California.
That's right.
And
Same difference.
I didn't know what it was. When I saw it, I had no idea why it was there.
somebody commemorated the 1913 temperature spike, and then I went through all kinds of historical records to see what else was going on in the United States with weather. You can go to women's journals from the early 1900s, and the very first thing they write about, before they even write about their children or their husband, is what the weather was like that day. Mm-hmm. So bing, if someone wanted to go and research what was happening with the weather through certain industrial developments, you could start to make some connections. And I'm just a landscape architect from California telling you that this might be worth looking at.
Well, you mentioned the Federal Reserve earlier. If you're looking at 1913, there's another thing. It's not weather related, but or maybe it is.
It may be. It may be.
Well, Anne, I'm wondering, the disaster that happened at Porter Ranch with the methane release, could that have been averted? Because this is, again, related to natural gas.
Yes.
Could that have been averted using M.J. Trumble's technology?
Well, we're way beyond his technology now in terms of very safe capture of methane. The problem there, as I understand it, was the leaking of underground gas storage. When I presented my slideshow at the Petroleum History Institute in July, you could have heard a pin drop, because it was just, I mean, I made it shocking because I wanted to be the person who would bring up methane as one of the gases that is spiking. And of course, Porter Ranch being in California, I'm the crazy California girl. And of course, I brought that into the show. Immediately after I showed my slides, the room erupted with people having comments. And here we were gathered with scientists, engineers who were absolute experts on underground gas storage And then I just stepped back. The whole room just went into a conversation. I learned more in probably 6 minutes than if I'd gone to school for 6 years.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean,
Yeah, and there was
to be in the presence of all of that.
It's good energy, let me tell you, very good magumbo. But there was also one man felt compelled to bring forward a story that he knew from the USSR, where we're sitting here worried about fracking, which is very controversial, of course, but it can be done very safely. And I've toured the fields where it's done very safely. I live very close to natural gas storage and fracking facilities, and I'm still here. I don't think I've developed anything bad. But here we are so picky about the few purveyors that are so rotten as to do it the wrong way and to leak and they do everything wrong, from the casings to the water treatment to everything. And that is making the whole industry, it's destroying the whole industry.
So are you saying that oil doesn't have to be a boogeyman, that we can use oil wisely and safely?
Very much so. And that's human, that's that noble conscience feeling that comes from the people who work with it. And I mean, if you know Southern California gas workers, Southern California Edison workers, that noble conscience that they do their jobs with, that they would work for free in a disaster. I mean, this is the kind of people that would not let horrible things happen. So there's just a very slim number that let horrible things happen. And it's not here. There's one other point about one gentleman brought up knowing about a situation where they actually put a nuclear weapon into the ground to do the fracking.
That's unbelievable.
It's true.
Well, I hear I'd like to know more about that. I hear a lot of crazy things, like, for example, at Porter Ranch, that it wasn't just methane being released, but uranium. So can you tell me more? Tell us more about the nuclear weapon.
That didn't happen in our country, thank God, and I don't think it ever would. I don't think we're at that point. But what they've been doing at Porter Ranch is collecting metal samples on windowsills and places where things rain down. The AQMD, the Air Quality Management District, also posts daily the readings of various types of heavy metals. So there is a pretty good understanding of what a leak of that magnitude releases into the air. Methane dissipates very fast, but then you have other heavy metals that are not necessarily leaving, Elvis is still in the room type thing. And so we are at the very genesis of getting down to some extremely precise measurements that need to go on for all forms of everything we use and be normal, a normal part of life.
So Elvis caused the Porter Ranch gas leak, is what you're saying?
Possibly so.
Cool.
Or the ghost of Elvis.
Well, I think we can close the books on that one. So I'm curious. Did Trumble have did he have peers within the scope of his work, and if so, who were they, and in what capacity did they work together?
Good, you're reading my mind. And I'm not surprised. Basically, there's one gentleman who was kind of a rival of Trumble, and I want to give him credit historically. His name is Daniel Peisel, and you can Google his name. There are things about him. He served as the head of Shell Chemical and Development for a very long time, and we have such horrible, instant reactions to anything about chemical engineering.
Yeah, I had one. The creases on my forehead.
I think I felt it. It was emanating across the room. However, we're sitting here using, the products of chemical development. And again, we got to get down to more and more refinement. But let's go back to the beginning. You're talking about his peers. Daniel Peisel was actually the first person, a Dutchman, who received a degree that would be equivalent to petroleum engineering. And M.J. Trumble had no more than a fourth grade education, so he was one of these American inventors that just grew up on the farm, started testing everything he could, testing, building, and he was discovered as a young talent and brought through the ranks of masonry and engineers and everything else, so that toward the end, he did have an identification card that said engineer on it.
He was a Mason.
He was.
Okay, well, see, we have evil associations with that, okay?
You do, and I'm gonna caution against an overall blanketing of Masons, especially at 32nd degree level. I mean, I know some that are pretty cool, and I do not think that every one of them is evil. And everything that I have read is that up in the upper ranks is where you get into a lot of different practices that may not be right. And what I did was I read 8 books on Masonry in order to try and understand what he was and why he didn't go to 33rd degree.
And that's considered very evil, right?
Well, possibly so by some, but you have to go right back to the Knights Templar, back to a lot of the lore and legend and truth about what went on. There were so many different branches. Good branches, bad branches. It's like any industry where you could condemn the entire industry, but yet there were a lot of good participants in there, and then a few that really activated the parasitic energies. I find that in the history that I read, Trumble was 32nd degree, and I have seen the journals where his wife was, putting all that paraphernalia together for him. And he did not ascend to 33rd degree, and he certainly could have for the wealth that he had. The 33rd degree Masons that he was with were in the Knights Templar. So you're talking about a whole different organization that meets in London. I can't pass judgment on it because all I know is what I know about Trumble and what I've read in these books. And again, this is history written by different authors with different perspectives. And some of them say it's really evil, and some of them say, well, there was a lot of good done. I know that he was active with the group, the Al Malaika, I think it's called, that built the Shrine Auditorium. And these 32nd degree Masons had these big conventions every year in downtown Los Angeles. They were very memorable for anybody that was there. And I don't think you could look at an assembly of those people who were trying to build the Shrine Hospital, the Shrine Auditorium, and do all that good stuff and say, across the board, these were all evil, satanic family men. I just don't quite buy that, so I don't give it a blanket judgment. Yeah,
I understand. Well, what is it that we're not being told then about the history of oil? Because you know the hidden history. What's being hidden from us about oil and M.J. Trumble's refining process?
If I had to crystallize one thing that fascinates me that is going to be very hard to get information on, but I do have some information. It's the very deep involvement of both the Catholic Church and the Jewish leaders in oil. And this is something that, go ahead, Google it, try to research it.
So this is religious.
It's definitely religious.
Okay.
And you didn't have the Middle East involvement until later, but you did have the Catholic Church and the Jewish leaders definitely involved deeply in oil history. And I don't think they ever want that disclosed.
Interesting. Okay, that definitely interests me because we know that the religions are a lot about how our minds are controlled, and I am of the Jewish faith by birth, but I definitely think that religion is a box, and it is a way that the so-called rulers of the world can control our minds. So what would religious leaders in Catholicism and Judaism, what would they have a stake in here?
Money.
It's money.
Yeah, money and assets. Yeah, definitely. And power.
So these religious groups, they're not necessarily spiritual or religious.
No, I'm not talking about your everyday person that goes to the temple.
Not like me, who went to shul on Saturday.
No, and I went to catechism. Yeah, I mean,
so it's not that.
No, definitely, and certainly as a child, there was nothing I was ever taught about the Catholic Church's involvement with with petroleum. But when you talk about this being the very first energy source dominated by a cartel, okay, and you have to kind of put that in context. Coal didn't quite make it there, kerosene, whale oil, but this was the very first constructed cartel to dominate an energy form. And so it's been to their advantage on many levels, levels that you wouldn't even think, to keep that domination for as long as possible. And all the major energy companies have tried to roll into solar and everything, wind. The profits just aren't as massive. And you have to really understand those early profits and how that wasn't sustainable, but everybody tried to keep the profits sustainable.
I see.
Because it kept a lot of things going.
So we're not talking about religious leaders. We're talking about more like corporations or business entities that are operating under the guise of religions, then. Something like the Catholic Church. When you say that, we're not talking about religious people who are suppressing.
Well, I'd say that it's more omission than suppression. I mean, you know, if you had a troubled parishioner who came to you, even in confession, and there was some big thing going on at one of the oil companies where he worked, and we're talking like maybe in the 1950s or 60s, post-World War II, that group, whatever type of religious assembly it was, could probably get some answers for that troubled parishioner. If it really came down to that. And plus, you had people trying to protect their interests. So there's a geographic proximity between religious leaders and oil company headquarters, and Trumble was right in the thick of it. So, I mean, he was dancing on a wire, and then he ultimately wanted to bug out.
I see. So was he in danger?
Maybe so, because he did want his family to be very quiet about his activities. Definitely didn't want them out telling their friends and neighbors what they were up to.
Well, are his children, or actually he would be pretty old, so his grandchildren, are they still alive?
Yeah, he has a lot of descendants now.
Okay, are any of them like still active currently and continuing his work in any way?
Oh no. That ended when he died, and it was a very deliberate thing. In fact, I had copied a page that I had wanted to kind of make sure that I mentioned this. At the time of his death, when they smashed his experimental plant, the probate went on for 17 years, from 1931 to 1948. That's how long it took to disassemble this man's estate. And he had business interests going all over the world. So basically, when you go to court records at the Hall of Justice and you ask for a copy of this under the Freedom of Information Act, it's going to cost you $500, because he has an estate the size of, and a probate the size of Howard Hughes. So basically, what they did was, it only takes one accountant and one attorney to rip off a huge estate like his, and that's all it took. And he was able. His sons were kind of cut off at the knees at every turn, where they even wanted to keep like one oil property for some income for the family. His widow was sued again and again and again in court, just for the crime of being the widow of this inventor. And so the probate, everything that happened for the years after he died, is very strong evidence that there was absolutely no intention that his work would be carried on by his sons, who had worked very closely with him. And they went complete shutdown, and his wife and daughter saved the papers in secret.
Well, how would our energy usage in our world look different today if we had been using his technologies since he discovered them?
Even his peers, if you add his peers to his work, okay, they knew how to create clean coal energy, and they knew how to make clean energy out of everything, because you have to realize how strong the sentiment was for conservation and good stewardship of the earth in the 19 teens. And if you go back to that Art Deco art that was glorifying motherhood and you treated the earth as if you were a parent nurturing it. The oil technology that was all energy technology being developed back then was kind of a glorious thing. It was an honorable endeavor by people of noble conscience. However, we get into the parasitic influences. No, do it cheap. No, you can do this. No, you can. And those decisions get made, and systems get installed that get dirtier and dirtier and dirtier over time, despite all the laws to make it clean.
Did Trumble die under mysterious circumstances like Reich did?
Seems to me.
Because it sounds like he was only in his 50s at the time.
You're absolutely correct. I have the account from his widow in her diaries of how he suddenly took ill with this pneumonia. And if you go through the headlines of the president of oil, all the steel company that made components for all the oil companies, that was bought by U.S. Steel. You go to other people that were involved with Trumble, such as the governor of Wyoming, Frank Emerson. These people were all dying in quick succession from deadly pneumonia attack. And every time I would come across this headline, it was almost like a coded message. We had to take this one out, had to take this one out. And these were all people. So it wasn't just Trumble. There were many, many people who were involved in trying to move energy forward into a more diverse platform than just petroleum. And this is why the people that don't want you to know this history don't want you to put those pieces together.
I see.
So they were all ultimately, quote unquote, handled in bulk, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it seems that way.
Wow. So we're talking about a massive suppression campaign against a cleaner usage of our Earth's resources. I had no idea that back in the 19-teens there was this kind of reverence for our Earth. I kind of had the impression that the white man just wanted to destroy everything all along.
Brainwashing by the Revenant. We weren't all, those kinds of trappers and killers. And again, you have to kind of, like Gabe says all the time, discernment.
Right.
When you look at that history and you look at what, big media is delivering to you, no, they don't want you to know but you go to those Chamber of Commerce magazines, you go to symposium records, all these records are available for all of us to read and learn from, as long as we're not suppressed. And this, you don't even have to know who I am or who Trumble was, but we can learn just by knowing there was a reverence for the earth and energy, even if we hadn't known about scalar energy, free energy, and we had just gone with a cleaner way to do coal, kerosene, and carbon energy. I have a beautiful little vial of pure Pennsylvania crude oil. And, that vial is not evil.
Oil is not evil, right?
Yeah, and I really divide energy in terms of the Trumble and his peers into carbon and non-carbon.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about carbon emissions? I do not subscribe to the theory of global warming caused by our driving cars. I just don't, but many people do. So let's suppose that our driving cars and burning oil is causing global warming. Let's suppose it is a problem. Is there a way to use oil in a way that would not release the emissions that supposedly are causing all this warming effect?
Oh gosh, there's been so many engines invented over the years. I mean, we're talking about gasoline combustion engines and then a refinement of that and a refinement of that. We're talking about emissions laws that actually made the benchmark possibly too low. We would have exceeded that in terms of cleanliness. If the laws hadn't made, okay, here's the low benchmark and you just have to slide under that with your latest invention and get that out to the mass market. I mean, our thinking is so wrong. It's not that, conscious, noble care that a lot of energy inventors had in the beginning, in the early days. And that's one thing we're missing from our learning and our knowledge, and we need to kind of say, there's a sacred part of that Akashic record that is not evil. It wasn't trying to destroy the earth from the get-go. And I know because I've seen the evidence.
I like that you talk about the Akashic Records. That's something I learned about recently, and we had a guest on our show, Michelle Reimers, who explained what those records are, and I've since had a reading from her on my records, and it's actually very eye-opening to learn this history. She told me in my records there's a lot of world history, which I love, because I want to know. And I'm curious about your more intimate connection with Trumble, because clearly there's something here. You've discovered an inventor that no one talks about. You can't Google him. What's going on here? How did you come to this? Are you connected with him through some ancient...
Possibly. It feels like it.
Yeah.
It feels as if there are times when signals, if you want to say, electric signals are coming very, very clearly in quick succession. And then there's times when it's just not really happening. I don't even think about it. But I can definitely say through when I apply myself and write the biography or write another book because something really important is almost like a message that has to come through. I wrote the Trumble timeline just to put all of these things with his life in context with the rest of the world because it never was put in context before. And then I wrote a comparative history type small little book about do characters from MJ Trumble's era compare with the characters that Ayn Rand wrote in Atlas Shrugged.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really interesting one because she missed a whole bunch of history in the characters that she portrayed. Even though they were supposed to be 1950s or 1940s type characters, she missed a whole bunch about anything to do with the environment, the care, and the...
Yeah, I noticed that a lot of people who are voluntarists or anarchists or libertarians forget the environment.
Yes.
And I don't feel that way myself as a voluntarist.
Quite the opposite, in fact.
I don't understand what is this disregard for the environment. You see, I am against Agenda 21, but I'm not against the environment. I am actually a tree hugger myself. So I don't think we need to legislate our way into these.
And Agenda 21, despite what the mission statement is actually the opposite. It is against the environment. So when we say we are against Agenda 21, we are for the environment.
Right.
I'm against the hypocrisy of Agenda 21
Yes.
and so many of the people involved with it. I'm not saying every single scientist and arborist and horticulturist is evil. I'm not making an across-the-board assessment like that, but I'm just saying that the programming of what that is and how it's coming through cities and just decimating and sticking up these stack and packs in the middle of nowhere is not quite, inclusive enough for the way planning was designed to be, especially in California.
Mm-hmm. In your opinion, will new energy technologies be available in our lifetime?
If we make it so.
So it's up to us.
Absolutely.
I like I was going to say we, but I'm assuming that you're in agreement with me because we usually are. But I like that statement a lot. That goes in line with a lot of what we talk about on the show and about manifesting our own reality and not just taking the lies that are being fed to us to manifest the wrong reality. Mm-hmm. Because as Kate Bush says in Cloud Busting, just saying it can even make it happen. And if you're saying the wrong thing, then you're going to get that wrong thing. But as more and more people start saying the right thing and manifesting the right thing, it doesn't matter what kind of Orwellian disguises are placed into these different areas of government and these new proposals and whatever Agenda 21 has to offer coming down the line. It doesn't matter because the correct manifestation of the amount that is growing and growing and growing, it ultimately can't be stopped.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I find a lot of the Agenda 21 implementation is not actually environmentally sound anyway. I think that to call human beings separate from the earth is a grave mistake.
That's completely incorrect. Completely.
I think that's actually one of the biggest mistakes that Agenda 21 makes.
Well, that's where the parasitic nature of Agenda 21 really rears its ugly head, is in that statement specifically, because it is so wrong a statement that it becomes obvious to me. Humans and nature are intricately intertwined. And we've just been made to believe through the false history that, oh, it's our fault. We've been damaging the planet for eons. Not necessarily. There is an outside force here that's been contributing to it. And isn't that what we talk about on all of our episodes?
Well, yeah. I tend to think that leveling a city block in Hollywood and putting up a stack and pack high rise is not exactly great for the environment. I tend to think that leveling of existing buildings and putting up a new building using all kinds of resources is not actually sustainable, because there were people living in those houses. And in Behind the Green Mask by Rosa Quarry, she talks all about the idea of urban blight, right? She talks about how certain areas are declared blighted. And you can go to one of these areas and it's like a mom and pop hardware store and a few restaurants. I don't see blight.
That's more of the hypocrisy you were talking about, Anne, and that's the inversion, that they call that blighted, yet somehow cramming a bunch of people into these small cubes and blasting them with EMF. Oh, that's just fine.
And getting them off the land. I see generally a drive behind these globalists to get us off the land. How is it sustainable to tell us we can't farm? Isn't farming the definition of sustainable?
That's the hypocrisy right there. They're not being honest about what it actually is. They could never pass off this whole thing unless they lied about it.
Yeah,
so that's and Grindal 61 talks about this too. He's
great.
He does a great job of
I want to get him on the
to
show.
bring it full circle.
I hope you can.
I don't know if he does shows, but I'd like to get him on here because he's actually put together this great educational YouTube channel about Agenda 21 in the Inland Empire. It's very, very important for anyone in Southern California to be aware of this agenda.
That's GRINDALL 61.
We were just in Big Bear, and our host was driving us around the lake while we were doing our gifting, and there was every few feet one of these little bike lane emblems on the road.
Oh, God.
On a road where nobody in their right mind would be biking. There was one guy in a yellow vest. You know, take me back to Portland again. That was a total Oregon memory, because Oregon loves Agenda 21 because they eat it up.
Well, I'm sure they're getting plenty of money.
Oh, I'm sure they are, and they need it. But
These
at what cost?
These weren't just indicator arrows on the ground. These were every literally like 10 or 20 feet.
It was
over the
ridiculous.
top.
It was ridiculous.
Absolutely over the top.
And Gina told us what they were called, and I immediately became ill. She called them, and this is not her word, but they are called sharrows. Share the road arrows.
Oh my God.
It made me want to, I know. It made me want to go to city council and start, punching in some faces. It made me angry.
My God.
And I don't like to get angry.
Or just go into the foyer and start puking.
Well, it was very nauseating. It certainly was. Sharrows. Okay, I'll never use that word again. Why is this
Not
happening?
until the next time.
Okay, why is this happening in Big Bear? Predictive programming. This is because San Bernardino is ground zero for Agenda 21 implementation in Southern California. And you know a lot about this too. And I guess we're going to go back to Agenda 21. I see it such a link between your research on energy and MJ Trumble and these fraudulent contracts that are being produced now between globalist agencies and our local municipalities. I'd like to know more about this agenda in San Bernardino and how it relates to our energy usage and everything you're studying.
It's still evolving because I'm really focused more on our choices.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not here fighting against a boogeyman that I can't win. And when I wrote my geofiction novel, The Magic Eye, about MJ Trumble, I didn't give the boogeyman a name other than the shadow, right? And a lot of authors have used that, whether you want to consider it a shadow government or just people making decisions, that are supposed to control and manipulate millions of other people. So let's just say that there is a shadow over planning that, with money dangling from that shadow, that cities eager to survive are grabbing at.
I see.
And that is more the incentive that I see driving those choices than the people, okay, coming up and even feeling that they have a chance to provide input. And so the whole Environmental Quality Act that came about in California, and we do have the strictest laws, I think, anywhere, as far as, let's say, complexity, if not actually giving us clean air. But the people that are involved with it just, I don't know, there's just too much hypocrisy. I don't see people making choices. I see people like your neighbor fearful of such laws, drawing back instead of pulling in and engaging the way they should. My criticism of the city of Corona on the trees, and they come back at me with, oh, you need to start a citizens committee to start caring for the trees. You are making XYZ
Yeah, they
amount
just
of
came
money.
and leveled the trees.
Yeah, and I'm supposed to start a citizens committee, so I go online to take a look at it, and I find they can't even get a quorum in San Diego, a city that big, for the committee of citizens that are supposed to. I know, I laugh when I say that.
But that's to keep you on the hamster wheel.
Yeah.
That
that
is
whole
the
process.
hamster wheel to perfection. And so this is why the whole paradigm of how people engage, whether it be through social media or certain mechanisms that inventive people set up to start using iTree to track trees.
That worries me. Okay. What I want you to explain. What is iTree? To me, this sounds very
Orwellian.
yes. Okay.
Yes.
let's
Anything
talk.
that involves a smartphone can't be good.
No, it can't. But actually, I do think it's very important to bring it up. So
It's how you use it. Again, quiet, noble conscience. Just keep that in mind for any device you're using, whether it be a computer or a piece of software.
Well, yeah, just because you can do something with it doesn't mean you should.
Right. The evil though is always got to be battled. We're going to always be in this defensive posture because the parasites are so deep into everything, including perhaps the software. But iTree tracks urban forests and trees, the tree health, longevity, everything about the specimen. I mean, we do that in landscape architecture. We have a lot of specificity when it comes to trees. When you go to develop a parcel of land, your trees are graded A, B, C, D, E. So that, you may be able to transplant, you may be able to cut ones that are diseased that might be creating disease for other specimens. So there's a lot of data. Let's say a property that has 2,500 oak trees. I mean, they're protected by oak tree ordinance, but yet, on the other hand, we have a lot of dead oak trees in California now. We have a lot of dead pine trees and the magnolia trees.
yes, we've been noticing that too.
we've got such a mess to clean up, and the tools, the asymmetric tools and planning may be able to help, in my view, the way I look at it, with the cleanup and the restoration.
Well, I think this goes back to a point that I like to at least touch on in all of our shows, is that the only true progress that can ever be made is on that individual level. And we are, I think, pretty soundly against collectivism
Yes.
in most forms, because it diffuses the need for personal responsibility. And you mentioned the tree deaths. Well, a lot of the tree deaths that are going on, at least in California, are due to the proliferation of EMF
Cell
and
towers.
wireless technologies that emit those deadly frequencies, and it's harming animals too. But just to keep it in the realm of trees, it's really ultimately a hugely culpable in that field. And the only way that will be stopped, because the telecommunications companies are not going to be doing anything out of the goodness of their hearts, because they're all parasitically infected and mind controlled. So what it ultimately starts with is taking responsibility in your own life, and not just throwing your hands up in the air because you say, oh, well, my neighbor has Wi-Fi and all my other neighbors have Wi-Fi, and it doesn't matter what I do in my house because I'm surrounded by 14 other Wi-Fi routers, and so what good will it do? It's not about that. It's about leading by example,
Yes.
and about what we just talked about, manifestation.
It's-
And when you take action like that, not just talking about it, not complaining to people on Facebook about it that aren't even listening to you in the first place,
Or blocking you.
or that's the most likely result, actually. So we can see the discrepancy here between what inaction will get you, whether it's on the hamster wheel of going to these different government organizations and pleading with them, please stop spraying me with chemtrails, please stop putting GMO food on the shelves, please stop bathing me in EMF frequencies, please stop injecting my children with vaccines. That doesn't do anything.
Right.
That never, ever does anything other than just keeps the problem going. Mm-hmm. The only thing that solves the problem is by taking responsibility for yourself and for your own area. You have to stop choosing to be lied to. You have to accept that you've been lied to. And that's hard. We know that.
It's hard to accept.
It's very hard to accept. But when you can start to accept it, then and only then can you start to make changes. And it's tough for everyone because everyone's going through this. They want to make it seem like you're the only one who's thinking this way. It's not the case. Yeah. Don't believe the lies. Again, don't choose to be lied to. That's my mantra on this show. Mm-hmm. And when you choose not to be lied to, you start making the right decisions. And there'll be peaks and valleys. There'll be times when you get that confirmation from these parasitic entities that they don't like what you're doing. So they're going to psychically attack you with frequencies, which, believe me, they can do. They have done it. They will continue to do it. But you fight them off. You fight them off, and then... Sharon, is there anything else you want to add?
It's like...
I'll get off my soapbox
No,
now.
I love your soapbox. It's like in the story, if you go to my blog and look at the medicine wheel story from Big Bear, which was the gifting story from this last weekend, while we were building the medicine wheels, at the Eye of God, some teenagers or young people came up there. I didn't even see them. I just heard them. They came and parked the car and started playing satanic music.
Loudly.
Every time recently that we build medicine wheels, someone parks a car and plays satanic music.
Weird.
Like clockwork. To me, this tells me that it's working because the parasites don't like it. And they have mind controlled these individuals to come and try to disrupt us. Sure enough, after we finished the second wheel, the music stopped. Mm-hmm. Like that.
Yeah.
So, I want to ask you, Anne, first off, what is your experience of who these parasites are, since you do bring them up, and it's relevant to these discussions? Who are they to you?
To me, I think they come on in many different levels. I think they're small enough to exist inside of us. Each of us have had, anything from infections to, small, large, whatever, things that defied medical categorization and defied antibiotics. And that seems to be happening more and more as we get these superbugs that are beyond the most powerful antibiotics we have. And then we hear that antibiotics are going to stop being manufactured. So what are we going to go to next?
MMS.
Yeah, we know the answer to that.
Yeah. So basically, they can be very tiny. I came across a very interesting, I don't know if I had sent this to you, Sharon, but it really interested me at the time you and I had started to chat. The Cryptid Museum, the Thomas Maryland.
You did, and that made me think of the Museum of Jurassic Technology.
Yes.
These little museums with oddities and curiosities are fascinating. The cryptids, they are strange life forms, little skeletons.
Yeah, and this archaeologist went all over the world, collected these things. You can look it up on the internet. The Maryland, Merrylin, Cryptid Museum, just Google that and you'll see the pictures, extensive amount of pictures. Parasites could be those. I mean, I don't know for sure. And then they could be gigantic beings. They could be no more than a frequency, a burst of light, a blob, a pulsar. Whatever form they might exist in, I keep always saying that I agreed to the law of confusion to be here on Earth. And so I haven't applied my talents toward trying to figure out who these parasites are. I'm obviously tap dancing around who they are, because I really don't want to run into them on a dark road one day.
We have.
Yeah, I know you have, and I don't. I have no interest.
And quite literally a dark road.
I know.
So.
And they literally drove right next to our car.
Oh, I have no interest in wasting my energy or
No.
generating fear.
I understand.
We totally understand, and they could be metaphorical too, for all
They
we know.
could.
You know,
They
I
could.
do have some friends that feel that way about it, but you know, we just wanted to get your take on it, and we got a couple minutes left. And thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it so much. I wanted to give you a chance to give your website where people can reach you, find out about your work, because it's such a deep topic, far deeper than we could ever get into in a 2-hour time span. Can you please give that website?
The website that I maintain is www.envirotechnicalimaging.com. Just start the typing for EnviroTechnical, and it'll probably complete it for you. And you'll get there, and you'll see the first 4 page tabs on the left are about EnviroTechnical Imaging, the work that we talked about on the show here tonight, and the 4 page tabs on the right are about Milon J. Trumble. So we've covered both, just as we have tonight.
Mm-hmm. And can people also find out about upcoming events that you're doing past this speech at the Yorba Linda Library?
Yes, I'm looking to get a little bit more into the alternative media, so I will be scheduling events, and I am happy to come and address groups too.
Well, I don't know where you're going to find an in the alternative media, so good luck with that.
So your talk is in Yorba Linda at the library, Yorba Linda Public Library, on November 10th. Okay, 7 p.m.
Yes.
18181, was that it?
18181 Imperial Highway.
Your mind, I don't know how you...
Well, I'm a Valley boy, so the 818 area
Okay,
code.
so
there you go.
Whenever I hear ones in proximity with eights, I just ding, the
Well,
light turns on.
I love that we're all from Southern California because it's such a heritage we have here, and few people really understand what Southern California is about.
They think it's just crappy films and bad MK Ultra music coming from it. It's a lot more than just
No,
that.
there's so much more than that.
But
We have
not
such a
much more.
spirit down here in California, and I think that Huell Hauser really embodied that spirit. I'm a big fan. I love Southern California heritage and history, and MJ Trumble embodies that, and Anne, you do embody that as well.
Well, thank you. You guys are fabulous representatives of our wonderful Golden State.
And the parallels with Wilhelm Reich are just
They're striking, huh?
it's beyond striking. It's insane how deep the lie goes, and how every, we mentioned Tesla and Rife, and there are many others, more than we could ever think of. And it's just so formulaic how they all had to endure the same things throughout their lives, and how they just met their inglorious ending and were virtually just swept right under the carpet.
Not anymore, because that's why we're here on this show at the Human Frequency, to talk about these hidden secrets that are no longer hidden. And I thank you so much, Anne, for coming to be here with us today.
Thank you, guys.
And I thank you too. And you can come to our website, thechembow.com. That's THECHEMBOW, and visit our YouTube channel and check out all the great shows that we're doing. You've been listening to The Human Frequency on American Freedom Radio. Please tune in next week. Thank you, and good night.